In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
It is 100% real. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Curious Dimension podcast, where we explore the mysteries of the unknown and delve into the fascinating world of UFO disclosure, sacred geometry, crop circles, and more. I am your host, Matt Barone. I hope that you've been enjoying the conversations as much as I have been hosting them. Don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us reach more curious minds like yours. And if you want to stay updated with all our latest episodes, be sure to hammer that subscribe button. You won't want to miss any of the exciting discussions we have lined up. Finally, we love hearing from you. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on today's episode. Your feedback means the world to me and helps me shape future content. My guest today is Jim Garrison. Jim and I did a podcast about 8 months ago to discuss the state of UFO disclosure. A lot has happened between now and then, and as I record this on November 11th, I really wanted to have Jim back on before the upcoming Congressional UAP hearings, which are set to take place this Wednesday, November 13th. A little background on Jim in case you haven't seen episode number 5 that we did 8 months back. Jim received his bachelor's in history from the University of Santa Clara, a master's in history of religion from Harvard University, and a PhD in philosophical theology from Cambridge University. He has written numerous books and lectures on comparative philosophy and religion, world history and politics, and the implication of humanity's contact with extraterrestrial intelligences. Jim is the director of the New Paradigm Institute, Washington, D.C. office. Jim has worked with Danny Sheehan at the Christic Institute as director of nuclear policy and as director of the Easlen Soviet-American Exchange Program from 1985 to 1990. He also served as president of the Gorbachev Foundation, USA, from 1992 to 1995, and president of the State of the World Forum, 1995 to 2004 with Mikhail Gorbachev. It was really great catching up with Jim. He has a load of information. I really hope you guys enjoy this podcast. Without further ado, here's Jim Garrison. Right, Jim, we are live. How are you today?
Doing very well in Washington, D.C., a few days before the election.
That's
What's
right.
not to like?
What's the temperature like around the streets there?
It's going to be 80 degrees in terms of the weather, and I think the election is getting into very intense stages, and people in the Congress are all in their districts, and it's deserted at one level. Because everybody's gone, everybody's out there politicking, but it's an exciting time to be working on disclosure for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, what I wanted to talk today, and I know we have limited time, but what I wanted to talk about today was obviously Global Disclosure Day, New Paradigms Vision, the upcoming hearings, which are just about a couple weeks away, a little bit on Ubiquity University, and maybe the future of where this is all going to look like. So let's talk about Global Disclosure Day, because that was a big deal. And New Paradigm is, in my opinion, leading the charge with disclosure and cultivating this grassroots effort. Can we talk a little bit about Global Disclosure Day, how important that was, and what our kind of vision is here for that?
Yes, I think you're right. Global Disclosure Day was a milestone. It marked the first time that anyone had really put together a global coalition around a single intention of disclosure of the information that our governments have about the UFO UAP phenomenon. October 20th was the time when it was broadcast. That's the date in the legislation that was passed by Congress and signed by the president in December of 2023, by which all the government agencies and contracting corporations had to turn over all the information they gathered about the UFOs since the end of the Second World War, now called UAP, to the National Archives of the Library of Congress of the United States. That didn't happen. The disclosure has begun, but the legacy group and members of the Congress and the Senate stripped out the legislation last year of executive function. So it wasn't possible to compel the agencies, the contracting corporations to turn information over. However, we felt at the New Paradigm Institute and also at Ubiquity University, which is a major partner of the New Paradigm Institute, that we needed to gather the people from around the world to demarcate it. And in the spirit of the Earth Day that was started by a few individuals back in 1970 and grew to be a global recognized commemoration of the Earth, our intent is over the next number of years, on October 20th, each year, we're celebrating the single most important fact in all of human history, and that is that we are not alone, that extraterrestrial intelligences exist. They've been on planet Earth. Humans have the opportunity now to enter into their cosmic moment. So October 20th, in my view, and certainly in the intent of the New Paradigm Institute and its partners, wants to demarcate an annual commemoration of the importance of extraterrestrial contact.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a quick second to thank everybody who's been tuning into the shows. If you haven't already hit that like button or hammered that subscribe button, please do that now. It really helps the algorithm to let this show reach a wider audience. And yeah, please leave me a comment in the bottom. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Much love, guys. Can we talk about the larger picture of, so let's just talk about, we get that capital D disclosure. Let's just say that happens hypothetically. The shifts, the paradigm shifting, the new world that kind of emerges out of this, it's going to take some time. And there's going to have to be some adjustments. There's going to have to be a lot of content that's created to inform people. Because this whole topic, the whole UFO topic, it's still like this little cottage industry. People that are interested in it very passionately. And then you have, and that's a small group. And then you have everyone else that's on the periphery that may have heard the hearings and they're not paying attention to it the way certain individuals are. That small kind of cottage industry, we'll say, is paying attention to it. When that capital E disclosure happens, and in my personal opinion is this will be a slow drip with big little jumps coming here, like the hearings will be another one, and more people will get involved and understand it. And then there'll just be so many people that know about it, that will be disclosure. I'm not holding my breath for an overt announcement, although that would be great. When that day comes, when it's just so overwhelming that everyone's aware of this, what type of content creation, what type of industry do you see coming out of this? Because if open contact is where we're going, people are going to have to be prepared for that. And in my opinion, I don't think a lot of people are prepared for that.
I think you're right. And I think the lack of preparation has been intentional over the last 80 years as they've kept the entire domain completely secret. And were so successful that if you even talked about UFOs, you were considered crazy. What I think is the fact of the matter now, as we sit here in October of 2024, is that disclosure is now irreversible and is increasing its momentum.
Okay.
The statement of Michio Kaku, the physicist at Columbia University, on Ross Coulthard's reality check a couple months ago, I think is true. He says up until last year, the onus was on the movement to prove that UFOs exist. Now, with the Grush interview or testimony in the Congress, with the passing of the legislation, with everything that Lou Elizondo was saying, Coronel, more and more people are coming out and saying zero doubt. He says now the onus is on the government, those that want secrecy, to prove that UFOs don't exist. So I think where we are, Matt, is much further along than people may believe. Even though it's not a global media event, it is nevertheless past a very important milestone and threshold. And now, instead of pushing the rock up the hill, we're pushing the rock down the hill. The singular motivation, as I understand it, in talking with a number of people in the intelligence communities and the government, since I'm here in Washington, D.C., they know that the disclosure is inevitable, but because the implications of disclosure are so radical, it will affect every aspect of human life. If you think about the implications of taking in that we are not alone, and the ETs are here, and they've been here for some time, and it's possible to speak with them in an intelligible way, that will affect everything. So what the legacy group, the CIA, and all the governments of the world, they want to control disclosure so it doesn't upset the current governing elites. Because they know this is potentially revolutionary. So they say the public isn't ready, and in my view, the public is ready. And so it's a question of how we develop the narrative about disclosure. The national security state wants us to be afraid. They want to define this as a national security issue. We at the New Paradigm Institute and Ubiquity University and various other of our partners want the narrative to be one of open-hearted embrace of the extraterrestrials, knowing that they have a variety of agendas. But the reality is they've been here for some time. They could have taken over anytime they wanted to. They haven't. What they've chosen to do is stay essentially gossamer, but warning us all over the world and for the last 80 years that we're in danger of destroying ourselves and in danger of destroying the environment. And we need to stop, particularly our nuclear weapons and the destruction of the ecosystem. That's what they've been telling us. So in my view, what we're dealing with is a phenomenon that's ultimately benign. We still have to protect human sovereignty, but it's ultimately benign. So that's one reason why New Paradigm Institute and Ubiquity University have come together in a partnership to provide training programs, one certificate in the history, law, politics, and technology of UAP, and the one by Ubiquity University on extraterrestrial awareness and communication, leading to the first ever graduate degrees in extraterrestrial studies. So you can get master's and PhD degrees. The key for us is not only the radical democratization of the knowledge about what we're dealing with, but teaching people the mother tongue, teaching people remote viewing, mental telepathy, which are techniques that anybody can learn because everybody possesses the capacity by which we can begin intelligible communications with the extraterrestrials. Just imagine a world in which billions of people on a regular basis are talking with the ETs, rather than this being the exclusive purview of the United States government and the CIA. They have remote viewers. They're doing it, but they're doing it within a national security frame. We're doing it within a human development into its cosmic moment frame. So I would encourage all of your listeners to go to the newparadigminstitute.org or ubiquityuniversity.org and look up our programs on extraterrestrial studies, because this is what the human race needs to do. We need to know about the phenomenon, and we need to know how to communicate with these extraterrestrial beings.
And that was one of the areas I wanted to touch on. Are you guys partnering with the Monroe Institute, or who do you guys have coming in to help teach some of these techniques? Because the That's what I think a lot of people need to understand, because open contact, I think, will be this grassroots, people figuring out how to do this kind of on their own. Maybe not tomorrow, but I think in mass over the years, this is going to become a thing where people are trying to do this for various reasons, personal, however you want to dissect that. Who are you guys partnering with? Who are you guys bringing in to help teach these techniques so that people can have these meaningful experiences?
Very good question. We've built a whole programs that will be starting on the 15th through the 21st of January with a 5-day intensive course, 8 hours a day for 5 days. Bertie Jaworski is one of the most well-known remote viewers anywhere. She became famous after 9/11 because she had been a remote viewer with the Stargate Institute and with various other remote viewing organizations. She's been remote viewing, I think, for 30, 40 years. And she was part of a group in 1999 that was tasked with predicting when the next terrorist attack would happen inside the United States. Mm-hmm. And she saw the 2 trade towers, she saw the airplanes, she saw everything. And of course, 2 years before, nobody thought about it until after it happened. And people realized that, in fact, she had seen the future. And she works with the police departments and has caught criminals as far away as Australia just through remote viewing. And just to give people a sense of what remote viewing is, it
This
would
is
be
really
as if I'm
important.
sitting here in Washington, D.C. Where are you?
I'm in.
Northeast Florida. So Matt's in Northeast Florida. I'm in Washington, D.C. If I opened a book and there's a picture on one of the pages of the book that I just opened, and I told Matt, all right, look at the picture. Tell me what the picture is. His capacity to go into the silence and see what's a picture in my book, that's what remote viewing is. Because the reality is our minds are not epiphenomena of our brains. Our brains are like receiving sets, like TV sets. And the frequencies are all over. Like right now, the CNN, MSNBC, everybody, BBC is all coming through this room. I don't have my receiver on. But as soon as I got my receiver on, you can pick up BBC anywhere. That's what remote viewing is. It allows us to become receivers in a field of knowing. And there's some people like Bertie Jaworski who are really good at it. All of us can learn it. And then in starting through the next 12 months of 2025, we have courses with the Monroe Institute. We have courses with various remote viewing. We're going to be teaching people the protocols. You start intelligibly communicating with extraterrestrial beings. They're far more advanced than we are. You notice that most of them don't have very much of a mouth. It's because they all communicate by mental telepathy. We all have that capacity. So in the course of the next year, a New Paradigm Institute and Ubiquity University are going to be beginning a global training on extraterrestrial awareness and communication. This year in 2024, we've been building the certificate with Danny Sheehan, with Richard Dolan, with Don Schmidt, with Gary Hazeltine. He's going to be in November, December on the Rendlesham sighting in Britain in 1981. It's been called the Roswell, the British Roswell, where a craft actually landed and people touched it and then it flew off. It's an amazing story. Then for all of your listeners who really want to get into it, the most important thing to do for them, all of us to do, is become informed. Follow the news. Look at Reality Check with Ross Coulthard. Read Richard Dolan's book, UFOs in the National Security State. Look at his videos. Watch the podcasts that are coming out. 2-3 years ago, there were hardly any podcasts on this. Now you can't keep up with them.
You can't keep up.
You just can't keep up. And then the House is going to have a hearing on November 13th. Senator Gillibrand is going to have Senate hearings. And when 30 to 40 whistleblowers have lined up wanting to testify, there's all kinds of activity, not only in the United States, but all over the world. Brazil, for example, just passed legislation designating ufology, the study of UFOs, as an official, professional discipline. That doesn't exist in the United States.
No.
Right? We're still in the dark ages. So other countries are doing some really interesting work on this phenomenon. And we at the New Paradigm Institute have put together what we call the two things. One is the Citizens for Disclosure, citizen activist groups all over the United States. I think we're in nearly 50 states now, and in a couple dozen countries around the world. And then also the Disclosure Diplomacy Network, connecting different groups in different countries. I think we're up to 12, 15 countries that are working like we are to pressure their governments to disclose the information that they know. We were just talking with a guy yesterday from Finland who back in 1997 was walking along home from the sauna in December of 1997. Sees a UFO. Got so close that he had radiation burns. So what did the Finnish government do with the craft? Nobody knows.
So are you saying that was recovered?
We don't know. We don't
know. But he had an experience.
Yeah, it's like Roswell. Roswell has now become a certifiable fact. But for 80 years, the government came up with 4 different official explanations of what happened, starting with the first one, that this is a flying saucer, folks. It's a weather balloon. Then it became something else, and then it became something else. And they told even some of the children whose parents had told them about it, if you don't keep your mouth shut on this, we'll kill your family and stuff. They were really harsh.
Yeah. I just had Don Schmidt on 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have him on real bad because I had finished his book, Witness to Roswell. In fact, I had asked Steve Bassett because I was looking for the most comprehensive facts about Roswell. And I asked Steve Bassett, and he emphatically said Witness to Roswell by Don Schmidt.
Yeah.
And so I went and read it, and I was like, you can't read this book and think nothing happened. This is, there's 600 witnesses here. They've all been harassed. He's got everybody from the paper boys watching the low boys taking these things off out of Roswell to Walter Haut, who's giving out the press releases and then gives a certified confession of what was really going on, and everyone in between. So if you look at that case alone, had that case back in the 90s been put before congressional hearings, I think you cracked this thing wide open, because those people were still alive in the 90s. That was only 40, 50 years after the fact. And so those people were still alive. And what they did was they just delayed and delayed until those people died off. And so then that gets lost. And
very few of them left now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the most famous case in American sort of lore, which the only reason that's just not a slam dunk is because we just don't have the hardware. But if you look at everything else, that happened. There's nothing else to say.
I think we do have the hardware. They're just not admitted.
Right. Don Schmidt just hasn't held it in his hands yet.
Yeah. And it's worth pointing out, Matt, that the Roswell case is a classic for 2 reasons. One, an alien craft actually crashed. Mm-hmm. Alien bodies were killed. There was 4 found. So we know that happened. It's also classic because that's when the cover-up really started.
Right.
That's when the government decided, wait a minute, we don't want anybody to know this information. And we have to, eliminate it coercively and over time. So the UFO phenomenon really started. There was incidences before that, of course. But in terms of a major event, Roswell is the first major UFO event since the Second World War. Mm-hmm. And that's when also the cover-up started. It's a classic case that needs to be studied. In fact, we're just finishing up an 8-week course by Don Schmidt as part of our certificate program on Roswell.
It would take 8 weeks too, because of the comprehensive work he's done on that. It's amazing. You can go into such detail with each witness, and I'm sure it takes 8 weeks to really go through the fine-tooth comb. And by the end of that 8 weeks, you're you got to be convinced. There's no other way to split that.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
Exactly.
yeah, that's amazing that you got Don there doing this. What an absolute amazing resource. Someone who's worked with J. Allen Hynek all the way back to the 70s, who's been involved with this and has seen the peaks and valleys with this topic. And that was one of the things I asked him about, because there's few people around that have his type of intelligence and his timing with this, that understand how this is going. And I asked him, this moment right now that we're in, after all this time you've seen, how important is this moment? He goes, and I'm going to butcher what he said, this is the time where we run the football into the end zone. He goes, we have this momentum. We have to push now. These hearings are a big deal, and it just has to keep going so that we can get that capital D disclosure.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I wanted to ask you about the upcoming hearings, because this is a big deal. I think this is another little jump we're having here. And the more hearings, the more people that go on public record, the more this gets out into the light. I don't think the witness list has been released yet, but do you have any insights on that? And do you have any insights on the type of testimony we're going to be having, and how significant is this really going to be?
I think it's significant in two ways, Matt. One is that it's considered significant enough for Mike Turner, the head of the House Intelligence Committee, to try to stop it. That means they know that some stuff is going to come out. And your listeners may know that a couple of weeks ago, Ross Coulthard interviewed Daniel Schellenberger, who had talked with Michael Schellenberger. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I had talked with a whistleblower, and the whistleblower had told him about Immaculate Constellation, this top secret special access program in the Pentagon that was overseeing other special access programs, all involved in crash retrieval. That's what they did with the Roswell craft. They took it eventually to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, where Mike Turner has the congressional district. And it probably sits there to the present day. And they've been trying to reverse engineer not only the Roswell craft, but apparently, according to others, the United States government has in its possession upwards of a dozen, maybe more, crashed alien craft and scores of alien, what they call biologics. He was very dramatic in this announcement that the hearings need to be postponed and canceled. It's a sensitive national security issue, et cetera, et cetera. The other point is that what Representative May said, we're going to have this hearing come hell or high water.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives you a sense of the momentum of disclosure. This had happened 10 years ago, 15 years ago. There would have not only not been any hearings, there would have been no knowledge of Immaculate Constellation, and there would have been no discussion in the House or the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that in an election year,
Mm-hmm.
we have had the creation of the UAP caucus. We've had testimony in the spring. We didn't make it on the UAP records collection 2.0. Unfortunately, that got sidelines, but we're going to have, within a week of the election, man, we're having hearings. And as far what we understand is that Lou Elizondo and Tim Gallaudet, the Rear Admiral, Tim Gallaudet, and Lou Elizondo, everybody knows, is the former director of ATIP, the All-Domain Aerospace Threat Identification Program, whose book Imminent is now a New York Times bestseller. We understand that's the discussion, and there may be other testimony. We'll see. But we're making progress in a very, I would say, inexorable way. The cat is out of the bag.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's true.
That's what's true. Yeah, that's what it certainly feels like. Let me see where I wanted to go with this. Let's just say that these hearings have some firsthand witnesses that we've never heard of before, people that have had firsthand knowledge, possibly even touched craft or worked on biologics. when that information comes out, that's explosive information. David Grush was explosive in itself, but the narrative is that he didn't have firsthand knowledge. But then there's also whispers that he did have firsthand knowledge, but could not talk about it. If these individuals do come forward and have safety in place to where they can talk about things that are highly sensitive, that people behind the scenes do not want them talking about, if that's as explosive as it is, do you think that kind of tips the scales a little bit and mainstream media starts covering this? Like, what are these guys saying? What is this? Do you think that will happen, or do you think the mainstream media will still be suppressed?
I think the mainstream media at about every level is an instrument of the governing elite.
Mm.
We get through the mainstream media what they want us to know and how we're supposed to think. COVID, Ukraine, the Middle East, UAP disclosure, we're being manipulated by the mainstream media, in my view, at multiple levels as the governing elite seek to maintain control by shaping public opinion. How they shape it with, say, the war in Ukraine or what's going on in the Middle East is proactively. You get a barrage of stuff that's coming in, which isn't necessarily true, but it's what they want you to think. With UAP disclosure, it's the opposite. It's not sins of commission, it's sins of omission. So that they manipulate the public domain by not allowing any information into the public domain. Right? So Lou Elizondo had a breakthrough when CBS Morning News had him on for 7 minutes, and he held forth. He was on The Daily Show. He was on Joe Rogan. He was on various other mainstream media outlets with very powerful effect. Of course, his book was #1 on the New York Times bestseller list
For several weeks.
And we're beginning the breakthroughs. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if on November 13th, when Lou Elizondo, if it turns out, takes the oath and testifies, and what's important about what he's saying is he's saying zero doubt. They're here. Get used to it. They're not going away. We have to now adjust. Carl Nell, the aerospace executive and retired colonel from the U.S. Army, made headlines a couple months ago at a conference in New York where he said there is zero doubt.
The SALT Foundation, I think that was.
Yeah, there's zero doubt.
Can we elaborate a little bit on Carnell? Because in my mind, he is a massive major hitter that you guys have over there at New Paradigm Institute. He's not just some military individual. Can we talk a little bit about his background and why it is extremely significant that when someone like Carnell says these things, you should listen?
Like David Grush, who was very senior in the intelligence committee working at the geospatial research in the Navy, Lou Elizondo with the ATIP program that I indicated, very senior in the Pentagon. Carl Nell, similarly. His resume is a couple pages long. He's had extensive experience in various aspects of military strategy at very senior levels, was very much privy, as were Grush and Elizondo and others, on what was going on from an intelligence perspective in terms of the UAP disclosure. He continues to work very intimately, I would say, with the U.S. Congress on matters of legislation and the priorities for the bills that can support disclosure. He is exceedingly intelligent and very lucid in the way that he speaks. He was, along with Lou Elizondo and Ross Coulthard, he was on our Global Disclosure Day, and he added something that he didn't say at the SALT conference. There, he said zero doubt. On October 20th, in our Global Disclosure Day broadcast, he said, there's zero doubt. And I know this personally, right? So inch by inch, we're getting these levels of people coming out for the first time and saying, it's here. The facts are in. Zero doubt. Now let's get on with it. So it's no longer a matter of finding out more information to see if it's actually true. It's true.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do we do as a human race?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we sought to do with our Global Disclosure Day. And that's why the whole first segment of an event that lasted several hours was zero doubt. That was said by Lou Elizondo. It was said by Ross Coulthart. It was said by Carl Nell. It was said by Danny Sheehan. It was said by Richard Dolan. It was said by Don Schmidt, Steve Bassett, myself as the moderator. This is where we are on October 20th, 2024. There's zero doubt. And when one really, Matt, takes that in, your whole world changes.
Yeah, that's paradigm shifting.
Exactly.
When Colonel Colonel says things like that. We got about 5 or 10 minutes left here, Jim. I want to do just a little bit of speculation with you, and then we can wrap it up. So one of the things that Lou Elizondo said on the Jesse Michaels podcast, I'm not sure if you saw that, where Lou was on there. I think they recorded parts of that a couple of years ago and parts of that recently. But towards the end of that show, he gave a little bit of forecasting about why now. And his only comment was, we really need to start having this conversation. And almost alluding to the idea that maybe something is coming, maybe disclosure will happen through a grassroots effort. But my speculation is that maybe these sightings are just going to continue to get more egregious, and that the disclosure is in our hands to a certain extent, but possibly in the phenomenon's hands as well. Do you guys have a view on that over at New Paradigm? Do you have any insight on that?
I wouldn't want to speak for Danny Sheehan or the New Paradigm Institute, even though I'm the director of the Washington office of the New Paradigm Institute. But I think I would speak for many in the organization and elsewhere that there's a fundamental relationship between the reality that the human race at this moment is about ready to fall off the precipice into self-destruction by thermonuclear war. We're closer to thermonuclear war now than we've been at any time since the late 1940s, including the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. That's according to the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist. The atomic clock is now at 90 seconds to midnight. We also have catalyzed runaway climate change and the devastation of escalating frequencies of extreme weather events are really ripping the planet apart and savaging the basic foundations of human civilization. It's worth just noting that the modern appearances of the UFOs started when the United States dropped the bombs on Hiroshima, and according to Robert Oppenheimer, it was even on July 16th, 1945 at the Trinity Test Site near Alamogordo, New Mexico, where they ignited the first atomic device. He said orbs appeared in the air, in the sky. So if you add that over the last 80 years, tens of thousands of people, maybe more, have been in some kind of intelligible communication with extraterrestrials, both in the United States and globally. And you look at what's the most consistent message that the ETs have been communicating, as I said before, stop killing each other. Stop your nuclear weapons. Stop polluting the planet and decimating the ecosystem. Don't you know that planet Earth is rare in the cosmos for its biological diversity and density? What are you guys doing? as we get closer to Armageddon, the intensity of the ET contact is also escalating. So it's like all the trains coming in at once. What I think is the moment at which we found ourselves is that the human race is no longer capable of the kind of transformation that we all know we need, unless and until there's some third force that comes in and catalyzes the change of consciousness. I believe that's what the ETs are trying to do. I think they're trying to change consciousness. And that's why, in my view, the most important thing anybody can do at this moment in human history is learn the mother tongue, learn how to speak ET. And if you just know how to engage in intelligible communication with your pets, your dog, your cat, with the trees, any other sentient life or consciousness, you can communicate with ETs. Create an intent to be in communion, because the ability to engage in intelligible communication with extraterrestrial advanced beings is the kind of change in consciousness that John Mack, the psychiatrist at Harvard back in the 1990s, was talking about. He says the only way to appreciate the UFOs is with a new paradigm. That's why we're called the New Paradigm Institute. The problem with the national security state is they're trying to square a circle. They're trying to quantify in a national security frame a phenomenon that's actually about a change in consciousness. And so that's why the New Paradigm Institute is here. That's why we partnered with Ubiquity University to do this ET studies program. We want people to know the facts. We want people to know as much about the ETs as we possibly can gather and start to talk to them. They're actually quite available. So anyway, that I would say that would be where I come out on it. And that's why, for me, this is an extraordinary moment to be alive. We're at the greatest moment in the history of the world. We're now ushering in the most important fact and potential change in consciousness in history. And it's people like you, Matt, with your podcast. You're contributing to the growing wave that's bringing this awareness into human consciousness. And I thank you.
I thank you too, Jim. This has been another stimulating conversation. I really do see things the way you guys see it over there at New Paradigm, and I think this is inevitable. So I want to thank you for all your hard work. You, Danny, Don, Richard, everything you guys are doing over there, Steve Bassett. We got a couple minutes left. Do you want to tell people where to find you, how they can go to New Paradigm website and help out?
NewParadigmInstitute.org, UbiquityUniversity.org. Encourage all of you to look at our training program. Join our Citizens for Disclosure groups around the country and around the world. And if you're an experiencer, let us know. We have experiencer circles. We've got all kinds of ways that we're supporting this growing movement of humanity. Our ultimate goal, and this is where the global disclosure days that we're going to be advancing into the future, our ultimate goal is to create a global movement and a global coalition for disclosure.
That's fantastic. All right, Jim, thank you so much. Thank you very much, everybody. Hit that like button, that subscribe button, drop us a comment. Let me know what you think. You guys have a great day. Thanks for watching the show. I hope you guys are enjoying the content. If you're finding any value, please hit that subscribe button, that like button, and leave a comment. It doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps out the show.